Hello and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on which part of the world you're in. And thank you very much for being there for our webinar on, as always, an interesting subject. And today we are looking at it like an amalgamation of various topics. So there will be PCI and HIPAA. Again, this has been a suggestion by many of our participants for our webinars that has been going on diligently and very religiously for the past more than 5 years now. And so we have got quite a bit of fan following, and we have a few hundred people signing up every time, and this is all for free. We are doing this for the community, so thank you again for being there and gracing us with your presence. So without much ado, let me jump directly into it. So this webinar per se, okay, this PCI DSS and PCI DSS compliance for healthcare organization. Typically you would have seen all these topics for, you would see this for fintech companies, online companies and stuff. So this is something, what about for healthcare organizations? So the question that comes up is healthcare and PCI DSS. Yes, we've done it for a few companies. And so let's just check it out. And these are the topics that we had said and that has been circulated for you, what would be covered in the webinar. I will try to do this to the best of my abilities in this ongoing session. All right, before we proceed, I hope you are able to hear me and you're able to see me and the changing slide set. So I really hope that you're able to see me. In case not, or if there is any disturbance in the sound, please do feel free to drop me a line on the chat box. All right, so going ahead. Okay, now just before we start, this is not an in-depth session on PCI DSS and or HIPAA. Okay, this session is on the overlap between PCI DSS and HIPAA. So, and again, in case you are attending for the full webinar, then it is one CPE point that you get for attending the whole, and it can be used, the CPE can be used for almost all the various known certifications, CISSP, CSAR, CSM, even a PCI QSA and other other certifications. But let me tell you very clearly that we do not provide any sort of certificate for you, all right? Because we've got hundreds of people attending and we're doing this for free. We can't really afford to put up the bandwidth for giving individualized and unique certificates. So what we do is that you can claim this in your when you're filling in the CPE hours, and in case the organization where you're submitting it has any query, they can write back to us. We've had a few instances where they did write back to us, and we check the records because we have all the records of all our attendees. And in case you've attended the webinar till the end, we do reply in positive. So ensure that you're attending this to the very end. And don't worry, you can submit your CPE points without uploading any sort of certificate. Okay. And for various more free webinars and more content, do feel free to check out our YouTube channel. It is by far the most visited compliance channel on the internet. We have a few thousand subscribers, where for other companies it's like 10% of that. All right, so that's how it is. So ensure that you are subscribing and you are there. Okay, there I've typed it in for you. And if you visit our company website, vistainfosec.com, you can get hundreds of articles that we have published, and that to in-depth, well-researched articles you can see for free. For that, you can head out to vistainfosec.com. And as you go along, do type in your queries in the chat box and I will take it up. And in case you're watching this online or a YouTube channel, do leave it in the comments and we do get back to you on this. All right. So, and also feel free to share topics for the next webinar, and as always we do consider, and we will I can't promise you that, but we'll try our best to take it up. Right, thank you again. And so about me, okay, and looking at the attendees, quite a few are regulars for the past few years. Thank you again, Anatoly, and so many others, and thank you again for being there diligently over the years. And again, I can see a few clients also. Thank you again for gracing me with your presence. Yeah, so about me, okay, I've been there for like almost 30 years now in this industry, and I know I don't look that old, but yeah, I'm not that old. All right. Okay, and of course, I'm myself a PCI QSA, CISSP, PCI SSA2, okay, and CISSP series and 27001. So many things. Okay, I've got my own company, Vista InfoSec, and the company has been there for like 20 years now. Okay, and at the end of the webinar, do share your survey. Do fill up the survey and share your valuable comments that will be coming up at the end. Okay, so delving immediately into the topic, over 75% of the healthcare industry has been infected with malware over the last 1 year. This industry security scorecard went through more than 700 healthcare institutions, organizations, and they came up with the statistics that 75% have been infected with malware over the last 1 year. So this has been the breakup, and you can see that the representation has been quite across the board. So that is the one of the key reasons for having this webinar in the first place. And so let us quickly just jump and just spend like 5 minutes on the definition of PCI, history and scope, and the council, and what's new in the latest version of 4.0. Okay, PCI DSS, PCI Payment Card Industry Data Security Standards. Again, this webinar is not for an in-depth view of PCI DSS. You can head out to our YouTube channel. I already put it in the chat box. A playlist over there which speaks about PCI standards, PCI DSS, PCI QPA, SSF, SSA, and all those things. So you can visit there, and there is more than 10, 15, I think, or more webinars, recordings over there. Many there is an Ask the Experts in which we are covering PCI topics in detail. And of course, head out to our resource channel, and there is resources website vistainfosec.com, and you will see hundreds of articles also. Okay, created by the PCI Council, and again, it was designed to improve security against card fraud. Okay, card fraud. So not healthcare information, but against card fraud. I know you're thinking, okay, what does now this has to do with healthcare industry? So wait for it, it's coming. And again, there are key terms for this. There is a merchant is there who is from your content or whatever you want to buy. And of course, there's a service provider that is sitting in between the acquirer and the merchant, and which is providing various services to you. It could be a payment gateways, it could be a payment aggregator, it could be your switching providers, so many providers possibilities, or your customer service, so many possibilities are there. And last, another term is the SSF, Secure Software Framework, and our company is a PCI SSF company, and this standard basically deals with developing secure softwares for the payment industry or the payment card industry, yes. And so this has been the history of PCI DSS over the years, and how the versions has been released. The latest one released like more than a year back in March 2022, and it's already live. But at the same time, 3.2.1 is also live. The hard stop for 3.2.1 and moving into 4.0 is March 31st, 2025. So just like less than 2 years down the line. PCI standards came up in 2004, and somewhere over here, 2008, we started. Just before this, we started working on with 1.1 and then moved into 1.2. So we've been there for PCI DSS since 15 years now. The scope of PCI DSS, so now PCI DSS scoping, if you want to learn, there is an entire webinar. It's one of the most viewed. Thousands of people have viewed that webinar on our channel for PCI scoping, but I can't touch all those areas. So PCI scoping refers to all the people process technologies, the PPT, card processing, all the people process and technologies for organizations that either store or process or transmit card data. That's the first thing. And second is providing a service that can impact the card, that can impact card security for an organization. So a service provider providing a service that can impact the card security in an organization, then that has to be covered in PCI DSS. So your firewall vendor, your server vendors, logging on remotely to your network, those have to be in scope. Okay, so that's what is written down. The cardholder data environment, CDE, and of course connected to systems. Any systems connected to the CDE are considered a part of scope, even though they might not even be touching the card data directly. The second part is something that is most of the time missed out, and that's where most of the vulnerabilities also lie. All right. So guys, I really hope you can hear me, right? Can you just drop in a message in case you are able to hear me? Just put it in the chat box or something that you are able to hear me, so I know that you are able to hear me. Thank you so much. All right. So I just got a bit worried. All quiet on the Western Front, so I just got a bit worried. So thanks for your responses. So what is not required to be in the PCI DSS scope? So anything that does not store, process, or transmit card data, that is the antithesis of what is in scope. And systems that are used for testing or development, again, if they're not doing testing and development with live card data, then they don't need to be in scope. Or systems that are used for disaster recovery or business continuity purposes, again, in case those systems are not storing or processing or transmitting card data. And again, systems that use third-party vendors. Now, for this, it is mandatory that those third-party vendors are themselves certified on PCI DSS, so you don't have to for that scope. So it has to be a risk-based approach. Keep your documentation updated, and of course, go for advice. Qualified organization and individual like us, yours truly, Okay, moving ahead. Okay, the PCI Security Standards Council (SSC), the governing body over the PCI DSS and all the 14 odd standards that are part of the plethora of standards managed and written by the PCI Council, which is an independent non-profit organization that manages also PCI DSS, created in 2006 by major card brands Visa, Mastercard, Amex, JCB, and Diners. And of course, the job is basically for providing trainings for various organizations and individuals, such as I'm a QSA, QPA, SSA, SLCL, many things. So I have to take the training from them. Of course, when I use the word have to, it doesn't mean that I don't like to. They do a brilliant job, absolutely super professional and knowledgeable individuals. And they provide this SAQ self-assessment tools. And again, they do the auditing of the independent auditors like us to confirm that we are in a position to do qualified or experienced and quality audits of the scope that is identified. Then what's new in PCI 4.0 is the latest version. It provides numerous, almost 55 odd new requirements are there, and it was published in the first quarter of 2022. Preview was there for more than a year. The latest preview was given in Jan 2022, and it's now in March 2022. There is a transition period from 3.1 to 4.0. Like we have had a few clients, rather quite a few clients, who's moved on to PCI DSS 4.0 and from 3.2.1. And there have been a few more clients who have continued or have gone in for 3.1 even today. So that's really not a problem. All right. And again, the development timeline is like this. As you can see, the RFC was given in the second quarter of 2021. Stakeholder reviewers happened. We were very much a part of it. Then again, the official release happened in the second quarter of 2022. And then the QSA training started immediately around the end of the last year. And the transition training is still happening. PCI 3.1 retired by the first quarter of, that is March 31st, 2024. Then again, it has to move onto the first quarter of 2025 will be the effective date for 100% implementation of PCI DSS 4.0 and also the non-mandatory controls, because as I said earlier, there are 55, if I'm not mistaken, 55 odd new requirements and changes, new requirements in the latest version of that. Around 12 are mandatory. Remainder 43 odd requirements are kept as best practices until the 31st of March 2025. So 31st of March 2025, these requirements become a mandate. Okay, there is a nice point that is given by Deepak, who says that business continuity systems may become production systems at some point of time. Deepak, if I'm not mistaken, I already mentioned that is, if the business continuity systems are somewhere where the card data would be going down to, even for storage in like a dormancy, so in that case, those are to be considered as part of scope. Yeah, you're right about that, but I think I already mentioned that. So thank you for your question. Okay, as per the latest report by IBM, the cost of breach in the healthcare industry has increased by 42% from 2020, just like 3 years back, and now the average cost of breach in the healthcare industry is $10.1 million as on last year. And of course, now coming to the point, what is the purpose of now PCI DSS in healthcare industry? So again, of course, we need to identify that what type of healthcare industry and where the PCI implementation is required in healthcare organizations, and then the risk and the mitigation and protecting patient privacy and health financial information. Importance of a secure environment is extremely important. Why? Without taking names, we were called by a major hospital for some same thing, PCI and stuff. And major means a huge hospital, huge chain of hospitals. So it's not just one big hospital, a huge chain of hospitals. Called me to their corporate office for discussions on PCI. So I had some queries and I wanted to understand their environment. So I called in, I asked him to call in their head of InfoSec and IT. After a few minutes, a guy walks in the overalls of a doctor, those white colored apron thing that they wear. And I looked at him, he looked at me, he said, yes, the head of IT and InfoSec. He said, yes, tell me, what can I do for you? I said, yes, thank you for asking, but I would like to speak to the head of IT and InfoSec. He said, I am the head of IT and InfoSec. I am Dr. So-and-so. What turns out is that this hospital chain had given the responsibility of IT and InfoSec to a doctor who had some IT background. Somehow these hospitals do not really consider data security to be a major thing, even though they are accepting millions of dollars in card payments very, very regularly, very frequently. And this major chain must be having like $1 million connection in card data card payments per day. It's that big. And that was the level of seriousness. So the overlap of PCI DSS and healthcare that's where it is, because they are more concerned with the privacy of health information to some level, because we also ended up doing HIPAA for them. And so they were very much interested in that. But apart from there, oh, we are just taking it for payments, it's nothing much. I said, yeah, and that's where PCI DSS comes for when you're taking payments, when you're taking card data by the thousands every day, that's where PCI comes in. And their response, I didn't know whether to laugh or feel sorry. Their response was, oh, we don't do much, we're not processing any card data, we're just taking it for payments. Yes, but you're storing it, you are transmitting it to your acquirer, and then you're settling the payments, right? So yeah, they're saying, yeah, we have to retain the card data on our records because for return, for repeat swipes or of medicines or any recurring expenses by the patients in patients. So I said, yes, that makes you much more bigger risk than most of the financial organizations too, because most of the financial organizations or merchants might have it in transit, they might not store it, but you're storing it, and that to long term. See, the problem that happens, friends, is that they are very much focused in what they're doing, and they're of course one of the best in whatever they're doing in the healthcare industry. And so infosec and IT is one of the least concerns. So they'll find somebody who doesn't have much to do, or why bother keeping a IT head or a CISO. And we see this very prevalent in hospital industry and the hospitality industry, like hotels. That is where these become the major target for credit card, thieves, if I can say that. So purposes of healthcare, again, what companies and healthcare organizations need to understand is that this applies to all organizations that store or process or transmit cardholder data. So in short, this includes healthcare organizations that accept payment cards as a form of payment for their services. I don't know a single healthcare service provider that doesn't accept card payments. Of course, some might have those dumb POS devices, no connection to their centralized systems, just connecting directly via GSM or internet connectivity to the acquiring switch service provider, and nothing enters the healthcare organization. But most of the major hospitals are also retaining the card data on records for repeat transactions. So they might say, okay, just deposit $10,000 for now, and then we'll see later on whatever is there, or maybe $5,000 for now, and then we'll see later on whatever happens. But then as the expenses grow, they would like to start debiting the card on their own. And that's where this thing comes into place. These hospitality organizations, these hospital organizations, healthcare organizations, they face a lot of risk from data breaches, fraud, and compliance violations. And that is where PCI DSS comes into place for protecting that card data. So again, as I was saying, I don't really would like to blame these hospitals and all, because they might not even be having a lot of systems, right? So they say, oh, don't worry, we just have like 10 machines, or we just have like 5 machines on the front desk accepting the card data. The card data doesn't go anywhere. How do you expect me to make so much investment for just 5 machines? And I've got 20 hospitals, so 5 machines, 20 hospitals is like 100 machines. How do you expect me to make so much investment for this? So of course I do understand. So that's what I say, if there is a risk, so you have to either treat the risk, transfer the risk, right? That's the only way that you can do this. You can't accept the risk, rather. So you either mitigate the risk, or you transfer the risk by, maybe giving it to some other, service organization that got the dedicated setup for providing such things, or you better get the right controls in place for all your locations wherever card data is becoming an entry or a storage or an exit point from your organization. So for the purpose of PCI DSS in healthcare, again, they must maintain a very secure environment for the card industry. And of course, a very end-to-end compliance program is also very necessary. It's not just having a firewall in place or patching an antivirus in place. That's what people typically feel is PCI all about. It's not. That's not even like 20% or 10, 15% of the overall control set. So again, this should include all the aspects, whether there's physical and environmental security, network security, access control, data security, application security, incident response, awareness training, and of course, last but not the least is the management responsibility. It cannot be pushed down. With due respect, it cannot be pushed down. I'm sure the doctor was an intelligent guy, but it's simply not his job. I doubt even if he has the expertise for that. Anyway, so it cannot be managed in that manner. And of course, the impact on healthcare, of course, number one is the compliance measure that's gone up through the roof. new control requirements, almost 55 odd requirements, and there are the common challenges between version 3.2.1 and 4.0. So I really hope this is trying to, starting to make sense for you. So impact on this thing. So healthcare so where is it going to impact these healthcare organizations? Typically, they do process card payment settings and are often overlooked in security. The requirements must be reflected in all your policies, all your technical controls, all your physical controls, everywhere, policies, procedures, everywhere, including your due diligence for third party payment card processors. So you can transfer your risk, but you are still accountable for it. Do remember that. So you can't say, oh, I found some guy and they were doing it the cheapest, I gave it to them, so they compromised. No, in case there's a problem in your hospital, my dear friend, you will be held responsible for it, right? You will be losing your reputation, you will be losing your clients, you will be hounded by the federal authorities. Of course, that service provider, of course, also will be, but you will have to show that you are also doing your due diligence and not just doing something to wash your hands of the responsibility. So do keep that in mind in case you're outsourcing. You need to update your security policies and controls, implement the new controls, and work with third-party payment card processors who can make your life principal your easy. And of course, not just having an SLA, but also doing regular assessments of your own to ensure that the third-party control service providers and including your internal controls are well in place. I really hope this is making sense to you. Okay, again, a nice comment. That is PCI DSS is not a mandatory compliance. It is recommended to be implemented by organizations like merchant acquirers. So, okay, now if you're playing on a legal note, yes, it's not a mandatory. From what perspective I should be asking? From the legal perspective, of course, it's not mandatory. For example, countries in Africa have made it mandate. India has, through the RBI control set, they have mandated PCI DSS. So those things are happening. So you can't say it's not a mandate. Secondly, is that let's assume whichever sector or whichever country that you come from, and maybe it's not a mandate, but then you're accepting payments, right? That payments needs to be authorized. First, it needs to be taken up by the acquirer sends it to the issuer. The acquirer simply won't agree to connect with you in case you don't have PCI DSS, because those acquirers are mandated by the payment brands with whom they work with. So Visa would have had it on record with this bank that whomsoever merchants that you're onboarding should be having PCI DSS in place, or service organizations for card authorization or card acquiring or card issuing, card authorization, you should be having your partner should be PCI DSS. So those banks won't agree to work with you unless you have PCI. So you can call that as a mandate in that respect. Hope that explains. Yes, Andre. So Andre has a nice question. Should the healthcare organization use some sort of continuous monitoring of system processes, control tools? Yes, of course, my friend. Andre, I appreciate your question. There's an entire domain in PCI DSS for the monitoring of the control systems. You can look up requirement number 10. Now, I don't know where you're coming from. Are you talking from within the organization or cross organizations? So if it is cross organizations, I have got a slide which covers that very point. So stay with me on that. So there are a lot of new controls, like a multi-factor authentication has become a mandate. Earlier, there were some gray areas in that. Password controls, it's gone up from 8 characters to 12 characters. There are numerous other challenges and requirements in PCI DSS 4. For example, a targeted risk analysis is a mandate. Very clear roles and responsibilities in your team has become a mandate. So the use of various hashing and encryption algorithms has been more clarified. You can look it up in our webinars on the changes of the differences in this. And of course, these are some of the key common challenges, that is lack of network segmentation, because simply speaking, they just want a network in place, payment taking the money from the cards. And so network segmentation and tracking and monitoring, then the logging, auditing and responding, all these things becomes the least of the worries. But this is where, this is how card breaches happen, right? And most of these hospitals and healthcare organizations, covered entities, business associates, many a time have got limited security capabilities and legacy applications in place. So they're using applications that is like decades old. They might not even be having the facility for, say, changing the usernames. They have fixed usernames. So lack of skill set that understands. So this is the last is what I have seen in most of the places. because you can get all the controls in place, you can get all the rest of the practices in place, but if you don't have the right people in place, what will you do, right? Okay, now HIPAA compliance versus PCI compliance. So what is PCI compliance? This is what will be coming into this now. So we'll look at again report by IBM Security. Then what is HIPAA compliance? Differences between the two and the additional differences between the two standards, similarities, then comparison, and then finally achieving compliance with both PCI HIPAA. The average breach size was 79,075 records, and the median breach was 88,871 records. So we have to realize that PCI DSS and HIPAA protect entirely different data sets. Now, in case you're wondering about HIPAA and the various control requirements and the domains in that, head out to our YouTube channel. It's there in your chat machine. It's there in your chat box, my YouTube channel. You can go there, there is a playlist created for HIPAA. Just go there. There are numerous webinars that covers it from basics to complex topics on HIPAA. So you're welcome for that. So healthcare entities typically handle both. That is personal healthcare information and also financial data, because somebody gets admitted to the hospital, that's where the PHI comes into place, the personal health information comes into place, and that person is paying, and more often than not, rather almost all the time, paying by credit cards or debit cards. So that's where the financial data comes into place. So these healthcare organizations are therefore responsible for both PCI and HIPAA compliance. Wow, there are quite a few queries popping in now. Okay, somebody asked whether there will be recording. Yes, but it's not immediate. It'll be after like 2 or 3 weeks or something. Okay, my friend Ashit has put a nice comment that in the USA, the state of Nevada, Minnesota, and Washington have state legislation that require PCI DSS. Other states may follow suit. So as I said, there are countries and states, even India, the RBI has mandated. Most of the African countries have mandated. Middle East has mandated PCI DSS, and now, as I understand, state of Nevada, Minnesota, and Washington have mandated, because that's the core, and that's the only and the best written standard for card payment protection. It has to follow suit. So compliance, the third point, look at compliance with one doesn't necessarily mean compliance with the other. So what I mean by that is, you do HIPAA doesn't mean you have PHI or you protected card data by default. And if you protected card data by default, doesn't mean you got HIPAA in place. Okay, this is a report by IBM. The cost of data breaches has gone up it has gone up for healthcare. It is the highest $9.2+ million minimum. That is the average cost of breach that has been showcased. So what is HIPAA compliance? Just in short, it's a US law that sets the national standards of protecting and for privacy and security. Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. Health Insurance. So Health and Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. So it was meant for use by hospitals, healthcare providers, insurance companies to transfer data in a very safe manner without impacting the end customer, and to smoothen out the rough edges, or not the rough edges, the moves from one insurance company to the other. Again, as I said, I can't get into more details. Do visit our site and look up our previous HIPAA videos. So HIPAA also protects citizen data while PCI DSS. So these are the key differences. And PCI DSS reduces fraud-related costs from loss of card data. So one is privacy-related, one is data-related with regards to financial loss. All right. So privacy and confidentiality, they're two separate things. So PCI DSS is specific only from the security requirements for card data. HIPAA is specific security requirements and much more from the privacy requirements from the privacy perspective of personal health information. So it is not just from the security part, but HIPAA includes security and also adds on privacy. Okay, but I have to say this one thing. I'm covering this even later on. Is that, again, do take this in the right way. This is my personal opinion as far as what I've seen across the dozens and hundreds of assignments you've done on HIPAA and others, is that the controls are specified in HIPAA, but they are not very clear or that direct and enforceable as it is written in PCI. We also advise our clients who are into healthcare and doing HIPAA and PCI, that is, take the privacy requirements from HIPAA and the security controls from PCI and apply the PCI controls, which is meant for only protecting card data, and apply it to your HIPAA data. And you would more than exceed, the security requirements from the HIPAA perspective, from the healthcare perspective. So that this is really going to help. So I'm not saying, again, I'm repeating, healthcare, the privacy aspects, PCI doesn't cover at all. The consent part, the interuse part, the right to update your data, forget your data, or delete your data, or just port your data from one provider to the other. So these are all privacy requirements covered in there. You might have read the GAPP, generally acceptable privacy principles. It's a Canadian standard. So HIPAA and GDP are all derived from that. PCI DSS is more from the security or protecting card data only, not concerned on the privacy angles, like the user consent and the information and the privacy policies and all. So what we say is that identify your HIPAA data, and because the security controls are not that stringent as we see in PCI, enhance the scope of your PCI to cover just even your HIPAA related data. Then you would have done a huge favor for your organization, because the PCI DSS security requirements are much more than what is mandated under HIPAA from the security perspective, not privacy. I hope this made sense to you. You can drop me a line in case it's still not clear. All right. Okay. Somebody is asked, what is the difference between standard and framework? Okay. Framework gives you a way to think and derive your own control set, like an ISO. It's not very that clear in what controls to actually implement. It leaves it to your risk-based methodology to identify the controls to implement, but gives you a methodology to think. A standard like a ISO is also a standard, so don't get me wrong. But what happens is that something when we use the word in a colloquial manner, PCI DSS standard, it doesn't give you it. Of course, there is a customized approach that has come up in PCI DSS 4, and but here it is very much more precise. This is what you have to do. Very precise, no angle for misinterpretation or looking at the spirit of the control and then implementing that you can do in a standard like an ISO standard. So I really hope that helps. All right, let me move ahead. I have so much more to cover, and I'm already hitting the bottom of my timeline. Okay, so covered entities and businesses must comply with HIPAA. These are different terminologies. I can't get into it. Whereas businesses processing credit card and or debit card information, storing or processing or transmitting card transactions must comply with PCI DSS. So meaningful use is what is meant by meaningful, because this is a privacy term. It is addressed in the HIPAA omnibus rule, but it's not there in PCI, because simply speaking, PCI is not concerned with privacy. And then, of course, so the additional key differences between PCI DSS and HIPAA: PCI compliance secures your payment information, whereas HIPAA secures your private health information. So one is concerned with security, one is concerned with privacy and security. That privacy and security is HIPAA. PCI is not concerned with privacy at all, but it is better, if I can say that, it is better than HIPAA in the security aspect. So if you can combine them together, you got the best of both worlds, right? So organization storing, organization that should comply, any organization that stores or processes or transfer card information requires PCI. HIPAA is applicable to all the organizations, even service providers, not just healthcare organizations. I've been using the word healthcare organization again and again, but it's not just healthcare information. It also applies to the service provider of the healthcare information. So that they come under covered entities and business associates. Most of the service providers gets covered as a business associate, right? And there are again the sub-business associates. So that's a different angle altogether. You want to learn about HIPAA, head out to our PCI, our YouTube channel, go to the playlist of HIPAA. All right. So how are they enforced? Now, PCI is enforced by the payment industry or the PCI Council, as I said earlier. Now, for HIPAA, it is enforced by the OCR. Then how do you manage compliance, and how do you check or verify for compliance? Now, you have to understand something. For PCI DSS, there is something called as an AOC that all companies get that are PCI DSS certified. That's a attestation of compliance that a QSA like me and my company give to our clients when they have successfully cleared PCI compliance. You can ask that from your vendors or your partners. For HIPAA, there is no list of authorized auditors unless you're talking about a HIPAA high trust. Now, most companies don't go in for that. Unless you're not talking about a HIPAA high trust, that's like a separate body together. HIPAA in itself, HIPAA high tech, as formulated by the HHS of the United States government, do not have an authorized list of auditors. So you have to go by due diligence. Identify a partner that is well known in the industry, has a good background in the industry, is known for delivering quality, and don't go for somebody who just charges you the least money, right? And go for that and get this thing done in the best way possible for you. so that there is the least amount of trouble in case there is a query, and in case somebody asks from where did you get this auditor and what the hell is it done, or there is a breach, and you have to show that you have done the due diligence on that. Because understand again, in the PCI, the council has identified and pre-vetted a list of auditors from which you have to select. You have to only select from that. You cannot go with your own choice or whatever. You have to select from that list of auditors only. But in HIPAA, there is nothing like that. It's a law, all right? So you have to understand that. And so again, some similarities between HIPAA. So both are security regulations. Okay, HIPAA is a regulation, PCI is not a regulation, but some countries and states do enforce it as a regulation. And both are designed for security. HIPAA goes one step beyond that. And both consist of controls and practices for compliance, but have different focuses or points of focus, as I've said earlier. And both aim to identify threats, reduce the vulnerability, and and control liability in case of a breach. As I said earlier too, is that HIPAA does a brilliant job on the privacy aspects, but not on the security. If you can extend the PCI control scope to include even your HIPAA sensitive data, you would have done a brilliant job, and your HIPAA security aspect would be would be going beyond what is even HIPAA asking you for. So this is a comparison table between HIPAA and PCI DSS controls. I will not get into this much. You can look it up later on. I'm already running extremely short of time. So for achieving compliance, one of the key points that I would like to bring to your notice is combining the framework between PHI and account data in one assessment. What I mean by that, we have clients where they are doing, okay, we have clients where we are doing multiple standards. It's become very common now. Like we are doing PCI, HIPAA, GDPR, SOC 2, ISO 27000 and 2770, which is the PIMS standard. So when we are doing these things, the first thing that we do is set up a framework, a GRC framework that identifies the overlaps between the standards. And you'll be surprised to see how much is the level of overlaps. Quite a few and quite a bit. So then what happens is once you have done that, it cuts down your work like anything. It cuts down your cost like anything. It even cuts down your time and effort for ongoing compliance. So that's the first step, and like the most important step that you can do is establishing a common framework that combines the two standards together. It requires a good amount of expertise and a good amount of involvement from the client side and the consultant and or the auditor, right? So one of the first things that we do is ask them to sit with us and explain to us the organization, give us a walkthrough of what they have been their organization been doing. So we have seen this. Why is it important? We have seen how HIPAA PCI compliance helps patient data and even strengthens HIPAA compliance. And then why is it important for healthcare organizations to work with PCI DSS compliant vendors? This is also very important. In case you're outsourcing, as I said earlier, even if you outsource, accountability is still yours, even though you've given the responsibility out. You can check compliance of a vendor by asking them to give you their AOC. Ask them for the AOC, check the coverage of services in it, and also check the expiry. When is it expiring, right? And what all that is covered. So your vendor might be giving you 5 services. They might be doing their service bouquet might have like 50 services in it, and they're giving your organization 5. What you need to check in the AOC coverage is that the AOC mentions those 5 services that you are getting. Just seeing the AOC and them saying we are PCI certified is not enough. You need to ensure and confirm that the AOC of your vendor, of your partner, mentions the services that you have taken from them. Many a time, these vendors you have seen or these partners only do PCI from the namesake perspective, so they cover some basic services and they don't cover all of them. But then they sell all their services saying that they are PCI DSS service certified, which they are not. They are only PCI DSS certified for those set of services marked out in the AOC. So make a note of that point. And moving ahead, so why is it important? We have seen this. It is crucial for the healthcare due to the prevalence of card payments in the industry, and non-compliance can result in severe penalties, liabilities, and reputational damage. As I said earlier, under privacy information, even card data comes. Right, so the fines can range from anywhere to $5,000 to $100,000 per month, and non-compliant organizations will be liable for the damages, plus their processing charges will go up, plus their insurance charges will go up. So the impact and the damage is exponential. So how does it help? How does PCI help HIPAA compliance? It encrypts the card data, limits access to the card data. It enforces or mandates the implementation of strong access control measures, and then it again mandates you to have a very strong information security policy, free entire gamut of policy procedures, work instructions, record formats, all the 4 tiers in place, not just one pager policy statement. Okay, don't mistake that top right thing that you see. All right. And then last but not the least is regulatory monitoring and testing the networks and the critical assets, requirement number 11, and so on. Okay. So reasons to benefit from working with PCI DSS compliant vendors. Again, it protects your patient data. It reduces your liability. It reduces your cost of compliance. So try and outsource it as much as possible, because healthcare organizations are good at what they do. They're just providing healthcare. This is a different thing altogether. But again, you can't wash your hands off together. And I do understand that large operations do need to have their card management setup in place. So do go ahead with PCI DSS. You'll be thankful. Now, ways to find PCI DSS compliant vendors. As I said, for service providers, ask for the latest AOC. And in case you are using a software that is processing the card data, ask for their latest PCI SSS secure software standard AOV attestation of validation of the product that you're using. How can they do that? The organizations need to have an AOC, need to do the self-assessment, vulnerability scanning, audit, compliance. So validating PCI DSS is not easy. Really, it is very tough, but it is worth the effort. So how does it help prevent? It protects your patient privacy. It strengthens your HIPAA compliance, because, as I said, there is an overlap. Security, they are overlapping. If you're having a very good network segregation, it is not going to protect just your card data but also your patient data. If you've got a very good vulnerability management program, it's not going to help just your card data setup but also your patient data setup. If you've got a very good end-to-end monitoring and responding system in place for your card data setup, which is required, say, as per requirement 10 of PCI DSS, it's not going to help just your card data setup but also your healthcare setup. So the benefits magnify across your setup. It helps prevent damage to reputation, of course, reduce cost in the long run. And how can you become PCI DSS compliant? Understand the requirements, assess your current security posture, that is like a pre-assessment or a gap assessment, implement the requirements. 12 requirements are there, and within that there are more than 400 controls mentioned. Document your security procedures, train your employees. All these are required as a part of PCI and also helps under HIPAA. And monitor and test your security controls. Last but not the least is responding to security incidents. So final thoughts in closing, I just has to breeze through this because we have breached our timelines. Very, very critical. So that was the end, and this is some information. This is our LinkedIn page. Do visit our LinkedIn page and subscribe to it. Follow our page, LinkedIn page. We upload content very, very regularly. At least one new content every week is a mandate in our organization. And our YouTube channel, as I said, the most well-known compliance channel on the net. Of course, it is 3,600 something subscribers, but yeah, it is the best that is there out there. And again, a gentle reminder about our survey. Do fill in the survey at the end and share your valuable feedback. It's your opinion is very, very important for us, and it will help us grow. Even your critical feedback is very important. Give us ideas of what we can cover in the next month webinar. And of course, thank you for sharing your time. It has been a pleasure. I really and sincerely thank you for your patience on this and your time and your cooperation. These are our contact details. Drop me a line if we can help you in any way. If you have any queries, I and my team are waiting there for you. Everything is free. Don't worry. We are there to help you, answer your queries. And I look forward to seeing you next month with a new webinar. Till then, take care and God bless you. Bye-bye.